Okay. We're just waiting for Amidullah. Amidullah's not. Okay, let's just starting the evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, who is watching us around of the world. I'm Rita Anwari, the founder director of Women Empowerment and Leadership. I would like to welcome you all here tonight for the fourth webinar series for empowering women. We are taking apology from Dr. Alima, for the Deputy Minister of Refugees from Afghanistan. She got the urgent calls, but she actually, we've got Amidullah Afghan, and we're waiting to participate him to take over Alima's space. I would like to, Women Empowerment Leadership, extremely honored to have Amidullah Afghan, the Deputy Minister from Refugee of Afghanistan, and also we have got Dr. Mrs. Singh. I can't pronounce Mrs. Singh, the Honorary Consul from India and in Queensland, and the Honorable Gail Curl Omer, CEO of the Access Community Service from Queensland, and also we have got Mrs. Rona Neda, a barrister at the United Chamber in Melbourne. Thank you all for participating in this event, and we are here tonight to talk about refugees, what refugee means, and why we are refugee in Queensland. We have got Ashray, the director of the founder of Emerson Family Law, and she's here tonight to taking over for asking a questions. And Ash, you've got the floor.
Thank you so much, Rita. And I think we might actually have to change the order of our speakers around a little bit as we're waiting for Mr. Afghan. So thank you everyone for being with us this evening. Obviously, we have a stellar panel lineup. So we had obviously hoped to start with the Deputy Minister, Dr. Alema, but she's not with us and neither is Mr. Afghan. So we might, Mrs. Singh, if it's okay, start with you in terms of the questions. So firstly, thank you very much for being with us this evening. And you're obviously doing wonderful, wonderful work in the community, and you are a woman of influence in your community and in the local community. So your insights in this summit are valuable, obviously. So it would be wonderful to begin with, if you could share with us in your, as consul, as honorary consul for India in Queensland, what sorts of issues that you're routinely involved in on a day-to-day basis.
I think her camera is, this is silent. It's mute.
Is it?
Yeah.
I see. All right. Can
you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes. Did you hear the question, Mrs. Singh?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind repeating that, just so that we have a nice flow of question and answer going.
Yes, of course, of course. So basically, the question was, as Honorary Consul for India in Queensland, what sorts of issues do you routinely, what sorts of issues are you routinely involved in?
Okay, so my role as Honorary Consul of India in Queensland is actually very varied and very diverse. So it could range anything between sort of trade and bilateral issues between Australia and Queensland and India. And also that pans over the local government, state government, and the policy sort of issues between the two countries. Anything that relates to India-Australia relationship. So I'm basically the local person, the contact person for any kind of problems that people may have in that space. So that's all the procedural stuff. But I also get involved with a lot of community work within the Indian community and also in the wider community. So my role is actually, like, basically you can call me a bridge builder. So to create harmony, cooperation, sense of friendship and the unity that we all have in Queensland, and to promote that on every conceivable level. So it's really interesting, because I deal with a lot of people of various backgrounds within the Indian community, of course, ranging from students to the elderly, to young migrants, to people that are here as tourists, or even those that have lived here for a few generations now, but who feel that they can sort of contribute to the betterment of society here. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. So obviously from what you've shared, you have a very, very diverse scope of your role, and it would be fair to say then that you are very involved in the support of the vulnerable persons, such as victims of domestic violence and those suffering from mental health issues within the Indian community, and then in connecting them to the relevant support services and agencies that are available. From your perspective, why do you believe that society as a whole is increasingly impacted by these issues, particularly following the incidence of COVID-19?
Okay, so that's quite an involved question. So I'm going to break it up into a couple of sections there. Yes. So to answer your first question, as to do I deal with a lot of issues relating to mental illness, depression, and obviously domestic and family violence. So the answer to that is yes. There is an increasing incidence of that happening, regrettably. And I think it's also a lot has to do with the pressures that people are facing in the current situation, especially since COVID has begun. I mean, there are deep-seated issues within the culture that obviously, lead to some of those issues that people face when they move to a new country, a new legal framework, new set of situations that they're dealing with. So I've noticed that a lot of people, when they move here as young, migrants, they don't have that the cultural support networks that they have in India, like the extended family, people that are there to help them if there was any need, financially, with bringing up children. There are obviously so many issues when you move to another country, and that's the stress factors just keep adding up. And sometimes people don't know that there is help available, that just by connecting with agencies and with people going through similar things, that there are ways out of it. So it's not like a hopeless situation. So it's I think that is a big concern, in my view, of how do we get this message across to people that you're not in it alone, and if you just have to reach out. And there are people in society, in community, and within the government and non-government sectors as well, who are always willing to help and lend a hand. So sorry, what was the second part of the question?
No, that was basically covering it. So it was basically to gain from your perspective an understanding as to why you believe society as a whole is increasingly impacted by these issues, particularly following the incidence of COVID-19. So I think you very much covered it from the perspective of, Indian passport holders and Indian nationals living in this country. But I suppose that a lot of those considerations extend to other CALD communities as well. So, I think that was quite comprehensively covered. Was there anything else you wish to add to
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, especially with the recent, job losses and financial insecurities that people are facing, I think that has also added to the pressures to a great extent. And also the fact that they are not able to meet people and their, friends and extended family if they are here face to face, or if they're interstate. So I think that feeling of loneliness and that feeling of maybe like a hopelessness about, how things will pan out and how long the situation will last has also contributed to a lot of stress amongst family members and family units.
True.
So that's what I wanted to add.
Not a problem. So then in saying all of this and having shared these reflections, how would you say your role has changed following COVID-19, and what do you identify as, from your perspective, as the great areas of need?
Okay, so I wouldn't say my role has changed very much, but I think it has diversified in a lot of ways, and it has become very there's been layers and layers within my role that have evolved with this present situation. So I'm finding that ever since COVID has struck, and I've had a lot of calls about mental depression, anxiety. A lot of parents in India really stressed out about their children stuck here. There's a lot of financial, insecurity that they're facing about being able to pay their fees and being able to meet the expenses. Then there have been issues of like almost people becoming homeless here because they couldn't afford the rent. And so I've had to do a lot of social sort of work in terms of counseling people, giving them that assurance that we are here to help, trying to connect them with people and agencies and community organizations that have done marvelous work over the last few months in, handing out free grocery packs and care packs and medicines and medical advice. And so we've had a whole range of kind of services that people have offered through temples, through religious groups, spiritual groups, yoga groups, just ordinary, citizens and people that have just thrown themselves behind this effort of communities helping people to get by.
Thank you, Ms.
So-
Singh. We have got Mr. Hamid Ahmed online as well, and
brilliant.
each participant has got 10 minutes because we've got only 40 minutes to talk. Thank you so much for all information. I actually take the floor.
Okay, thank you so much, Rita. Mr. Afghan, do we have you with us, Mr. Hamidullah?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry, we had some technical troubles with Zoom, so it's sorted out now.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for being with us on such short notice. I understand you're filling in for the Deputy Minister this evening, so appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I suppose if we're jumping straight to the questions then, Mr. Afghan, would you be able to give us a bit of an understanding as to the work you do within the ministry?
Yeah, thank you once again, and sorry for the Deputy Minister. She couldn't join. She apologizes because she was called for an urgent meeting today in the Presidential Palace. But I have discussed the issue and the questions. I will not go through the questions one by one, but I'll give you overall view of what we do at the ministry and what is our mandate. Ministry of Refugees and Repatriation is a government entity. It's a leading government entity that coordinates all issues around displacement that, whether it's refugees inside Afghanistan, whether it's Afghan refugees outside Afghanistan, and whether it's internally displaced persons inside Afghanistan. Migration is an issue in Afghanistan because due to 3-4 decades of war, we had a lot of refugees that are settled in neighboring countries and as well as all over the world, including Australia. Also, we have asylum seekers, around 400 from the regional countries nearby Afghanistan. We are facing an issue with asylum law. We don't have an asylum law in Afghanistan, so their seeking citizenship of Afghanistan is still an issue because we don't have that clarified in naturalization process of getting citizenship. So that is an issue in Afghanistan, and UNHCR is currently managing that along with other organizations. These asylum seekers that are from the regional countries. And the policy that we have is, first, we are working on asylum law. Still, it's in a draft phase, and it's not been approved yet. Once that is approved, the issue will be sorted out. So far, it's dealt with by UNHCR. They give them a residence card in cooperation with the Ministry of Interior. And they are resided in Afghanistan, but they're not the citizen of Afghanistan so far. We also have, just to give you an update about, we have around 5 million refugees, Afghan refugees in our neighboring countries of Iran and Pakistan, and also around 1 million across other countries in Europe, America, Turkey, and also Australia and all over the world. Since 2016, around 4 million Afghan has returned to their country, and their settlement, humanitarian assistance to these returnees, and also shelter issues, health issue, education. These are major problems and challenges that we are facing to provide these services to these refugees. We have international organizations by our side that are working with us, like UNHCR, IOM, WFP, and NRC, DRC, IRC, many organizations that are working in this regard. Apart from that, we also have around 3 million internally displaced persons in Afghanistan. The refugees that come to, the returnees that come to Afghanistan, sometimes they find it difficult to go to their places of origin, so they end up as a secondary displaced persons inside Afghanistan. So that's another issue we're facing, and plus war and conflict resulting in an increased number of internally displaced persons. Some of them need humanitarian assistance, and sometimes the conflict goes on for years and they cannot return to their places of origin. So issues of durable solutions, for example, school, health, shelter, land distribution, these issues are in our top agendas, and we are working on that, and it's also an area of challenge for us. In Geneva conference in 2018, migration was a prominent issue for Afghanistan in Geneva conference, and we tried to push that to get the attention of international organization and the stakeholders that are engaged in this area. We also have, since the peace talks are going on with Taliban by the government and also the US, we have drafted a plan for return after peace, and we are planning to pave the way for dignified and voluntary return of Afghan refugees, especially in Pakistan and Iran, after the peace deal has been concluded with Taliban. And that is, the plan is there, but we are waiting on the progress on the peace deal. So if and we have that plan as an integral part of the new conference of the Geneva conference that is going to happen soon in Geneva.
I would, thank you so much. We'll pass it on to Ash because we've got a limit time. We come back for the question.
I just said that's all from my side, so you can go ahead with it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Afghan. You very comprehensively covered all my questions, so nothing has been missed content-wise. So appreciate your insights there. Let's hope that this peace deal does come to fruition. So now we move on to our further esteemed guest, Ms. Gail Kerr, OAM of Access Community Services. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Your efforts in this space are truly to be commended, and we are privileged to have you with us this evening. If I can go to the first question for you. So from your perspective, why is it important that we have services for refugees within Australia?
Well, I wanted to say that since World War II, the 1951 Refugee Convention has seen 800,000 refugees settle into Australia. So it's a significant group of people that come to make Australia home, usually not by choice, but because of being displaced, the war and torture and trauma and other situations. So that's Australia's obligation under the 1951 Convention for Refugees. And I think, from a human rights perspective, it's our obligation to do our bit to help those that are, displaced, dispossessed, tortured and traumatized to come and settle into our country. As I said, this isn't often a choice people make. They're forced to come here often. So they're completely unprepared for a whole new world. What does it mean to settle in a new country, not speak language, not understand the systems and the services, how to get kids into school, how to get a job for yourself, you know, how to survive and thrive, I think is where Australia has done really well to invest in its settlement programs. So along with America and Canada, Australia is in the top 3 countries globally in terms of the refugee settlement support and programs that it provides. And I've been very proud to work with Access over the last, you know, 30 years, where we've been able to run those programs, helping people to settle and not just be here, but to, you know, become citizens, to become part of our community, to have the same rights and access, and to oblige and meet the law and the other obligations of settling in a new country. And I hope that that never changes for Australia as a country. And, you know, often refugees understand that they make the sacrifice, and it's the investment in their children and their grandchildren and future generations that we really see the contributions. And if we don't, as a country and as a settlement services, make that a really good foundational skill set for people to really be able to come and settle well and make their way through life, then we don't benefit from the richness that the future generations bring through their refugee experiences.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. So you've touched on obviously how their experiences are different and unique to some extent due to their past. One question I would be particularly interested to hear your insights on, given my area of practice, is how do we ensure that key messages get through to people who are sometimes traumatized by authority and do not have that trust for police, for example, due to bad experiences in their home countries?
And I think that's a really long-term prospect. You know, you can't just settle and immediately expect people to adapt and trust someone that's foreign to them, especially when you don't speak the language and it's a completely different context and a very different system to what you're probably used to. So some of the things that we do is to ensure that we have bilingual and bicultural workers who help support newly arrived people to settle. So they not only help provide that language support and help people to understand in language what's happening for them, but they help to build the cultural capacity of people to understand what's different, what's new, and how you adapt and meet and become part of that society. So for me, it's about building trust and really lots of information sessions, building relationships, the trust of community leaders, community elders, faith leaders, the general community, the responsibility of government. And I think it's just an ongoing process of building people's competency and trust and relationships. And it's often an organisation like Access, where we've meet and greet people at the moment of arrival, that we really build that first point of trust. And people often come back to us and seek our advice and our support to link them into the right people, and that the advice and the information and the networks we help them access are the right ones for them. And really, you just, you know, it's also about those government agencies, police and others, to make sure their messages get across, and that they use interpreters, that they make sure people understand their rights and their responsibilities, and that it's a reciprocal process as we build people towards understanding what it means to settle and be really a person, a citizen in our country.
Absolutely. So would your work then start?
Thank you so much, Gail. We move to Rana because we've got just only 5 minutes, sure, and then we can go to questioning. Thank you so much. We come back to questioning.
I'm glad you're keeping time, Rita. I was getting carried away in the content.
I know the conversation is very wonderful, but we just need to go through, and we want to hear from Rona.
Of course. Rona, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have with us this evening my learned colleague, Ms. Nida. Rona, thank you so much for being a part of this webinar this evening and sharing your personal and professional insights on this topic. As the first Afghan to be called to the Victorian Bar in 2006, as I understand it, you have of course already made your mark in legal history. So my first question for you is, are you able to share with us your story of arrival in Australia?
Thank you for inviting me. I came in year 1990 as on a spouse visa, and I did not get into learning English or studying or education for a significant period of time. And around about year 2000, I started to attend learning English for further study, and then from there onward, I obtained my accreditation in professional interpreting and translating in 5 languages. Practiced as an interpreter and translator at the same time. I studied social science and justice. I've done a number of professional activities, teaching at uni, constitutional law and admin law, teaching at Australian Defence Force, and currently my legal practice. 2006, 2005 I graduated, and in year 2006 I started studying to become a barrister, and worked with His Honour William Alston Brown, who is the Chief Judge of the Law Magistrates Court at the moment, and continued my legal practice since then.
That's wonderful. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And are you able to tell us a bit about the professional areas of work that you particularly practice in?
Well, I've launched the first barristers' chambers in year 2018, only because I thought that the community needed me to be closer to them, and the vast majority of Afghan and Iranian communities are located in southeastern area, which is the reason why I decided to launch the first barristers' chambers in Dandenong. I practice since, particularly since I started working from United Chambers. I am running a general practice pretty much everything. Currently having some direct access, as some of you might know the difference between practicing as a barrister and solicitor. And there are a number of limitations and restrictions for barristers to have direct access. The Victorian bar has quite relaxed, has been since last couple of years. So, being predominantly working within the community, not only Afghan, but other refugees who are residing in that area.
Sure, that's wonderful. And then I suppose from your perspective, how do you believe we as legal practitioners can truly assist these most vulnerable members of our community access the legal system?
Well, having access to the legal system is quite a difficult issue to discuss, predominantly because the biggest constraint in having access to the justice system is the limited funding provided by government. As you might be aware of, legal aid and other community legal services have very limited funding to provide legal assistance to those who cannot financially afford to pay for private practitioners. Whilst we cannot answer or rectify as individuals the legal funding provided by government, that factor is perhaps quite out of our control. However, I strongly believe that there is a big scope for lawyers to provide more pro bono legal services and get engaged and on regular basis with respect to providing legal services. I think we lawyers have that ability and capability. In fact, I have been, during the course of my legal practice, providing legal services and representations, court representations on pro bono basis and regular basis. But considering the fact that it is not compulsory, it's for legal practitioners in this country to provide pro bono legal services. It may be a factor that particularly Victorian bar, is taken to consideration, that perhaps if it could be taken as a compulsory obligation of all legal practitioners to provide pro bono legal services on perhaps even once or twice a year as part of the duties would be helpful. However, I mean, it's a very difficult issue to discuss under the circumstances that it is just the government funding is very limited, and there is no compulsory obligation on legal practitioners to provide their service.
Yes, and aside from the financial, inaccessibility of legal services to these vulnerable members of our community, do you see any other reasons or any sort of other barriers from your perspective as a legal practitioner that members such as refugees and CALD community members may face in accessing the legal system?
A lot of the time when during the course of my practice, I've experienced meeting with clients who do not have the awareness and knowledge of such services being in place, which can be another factor, and how it is brought to the attention or just awareness of the refugees is something that perhaps the community services can look into. But I think that has been a factor that a lot of times that when I meet clients with insufficient financial ability, and I ask them to, I don't do a lot of legal aid works as a barrister, refer them to legal aid, and sometimes they say that how it's done, how can we do that? And that can be a contributing factor to the issue.
Sure. Is there anything else that you would like to share this evening about the issues that have been raised by the other speakers, perhaps?
Well, there is nothing regarding the comments made by other speakers, except with respect to considering the fact that I'm practicing in pretty much all areas of law, and there are a lot of preliminary issues, procedural, to do with procedural law, that may be successfully conveyed by those community services to the refugees, such as in a criminal matter, the right to remain silent. It's a significant issue that often refugees think that it's not a right, or it may compromise cooperation, with the police. There are two distinct issues. It is significantly important to know that the right to remain silent in criminal matters when they are charged, arrested, or asked for interview is a significant right, and there is a reason that right exists, and the reason is that often when refugees are faced or approached by police, it can be very intimidating and confusing, and anything they say during that process is admissible evidence that can be held against them in court of law. that is a significant issue within refugees that often have very, very significant impacts.
Yes, I often say that with refugees and CALD community members, particularly who have the language barrier, our work as legal practitioners is doubly hard and challenging because we're sort of educating them about the legal system as well. So no, thank you so much for sharing those insights, Rona. That was really valuable. Rita, I think we've gone through all the questions.
We have got 4 minutes.
Yeah, no, all our questions are done, Rita.
Oh,
so we
great.
can open the floor to questions from any of the attendees.
So I think there's no questions. If there's any questions, any guest speakers got, so we're more than happy to take it over for another 3 minutes. If there's any questions? I think there's no questions. As a representative of the Women Empowerment Leadership, thank you so much for Mr. Ahmed Afghan to present him tonight on us tonight, and also Gail Curl, my wonderful boss. She's here today, and thank you so much for being here tonight. And Mrs. Singh, she's mother of the community, which we all respect. Thank you so much for being here. And Rona, I can't say so much. She speaks for herself, full of knowledge. The ladies, I met her in 1992 when I was a very young girl, and I still admire her character. And thank you so much for Ash. She's my sister, she's my colleague, and she's the one that I'm actually here today. Thank you so much for everybody's being here tonight, and we're looking forward to have the next event soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.